The hum of the old Whirlpool dishwasher vibrates through the linoleum floor of the kitchen, a low, relentless drone that fills the silence between my mother's sighs. It is a late Sunday evening in our split-level suburban home in Pennsylvania, where the yellow light overhead makes everything look tired, including the plate of cold spaghetti sitting untouched before me. I am 35 years old, wrapped in a faded, oversized gray hoodie I bought from TJ Maxx 4 seasons ago. Outside, the autumn wind rattles the window pane, but inside, the air feels heavier, choked by the scent of garlic and unspoken judgments. My mother scrapes her fork against her plate, her voice rising in its familiar, rhythmic cadence as she begins her nightly recitation of economic grievances. She laments the soaring price of groceries at the local supermarket, the escalating utility bills, and, inevitable as the tide, my brother's disastrously declining credit score. I listen without reacting, keeping my eyes locked onto the congealing pasta. My left hand rests inside my pocket, my thumb absently brushing the smooth glass of my smartphone. Beneath that screen, buried within a secured Charles Schwab investment application, lies an invisible reality, a net balance of $2,400,000. To the world, I am a financial ghost, a man hovering just above the poverty line. To my family, I am the stagnant child who failed to launch. Yet, over the past 6 months, the architecture of this house has subtly shifted. The familiar pressure has evaporated, replaced by something far more terrifying. My mother no longer urges me to find a new, higher-paying job. She just looks at me with a long, thoughtful gaze. Across the table, my brother talks about credit card debt, but suddenly stops mid-sentence. He stares intently at my old Toyota Corolla, with its dented rear bumper in the yard, and then smirks knowingly. The atmosphere is thick with scrutiny. I begin to fall into a state of extreme paranoia. They already know, right? They know I have millions of dollars, but they are not saying anything. They are silently observing how selfish I truly am. The suffocating tension of this intense psychological game of hide-and-seek does not end here. It reaches its sudden climax when the past suddenly knocks on the door, bringing a debt of gratitude that money cannot easily settle. 9 years ago, the winter wind in Pennsylvania did not just rattle window panes. It bit through the rusted floorboards of my broken-down sedan. I was 27 years old, completely penniless, unemployed, and officially evicted from my cramped apartment with nowhere left to go. My family offered nothing but disappointed silence, leaving me to freeze in the dark. The only person who saved my life was an immigrant named Mateo, my former boss at a small, dusty, local auto repair shop located down by the old highway. He did not ask questions. He simply dropped the keys to his warm basement apartment into my trembling hands, letting me live there completely rent-free for an entire year. Mateo gave me steady work beneath the grease-caked chassis of old trucks, paying me in crisp cash every Friday just so I could survive. He gave me a foundation when the earth beneath my feet was crumbling into dust. Now, the tables have turned, but the weight of survival remains. Yesterday, I drove past his shop and saw the orange foreclosure notice taped against the dirty glass window. Mateo is facing the absolute ruin of his life work because of an overdue bank debt of $70,000. I sit here at this dinner table knowing that $2,400,000 rests quietly in my electronic account. I possess the immediate ability to pull out a pen, sign a single paper check, and erase his entire financial nightmare in a single second without blinking. Yet, a violent internal battle erupts beneath my calm exterior. If I publicly step forward to hand him that check, the protective mask of my quiet wealth shatters instantly into 1,000 pieces. My mother, my brother, my suspicious colleagues at the office, and every distant relative who has been watching me will finally possess the concrete evidence they desire. I will transform overnight from a struggling underachiever into a walking vault, an endless target for their financial exploitation, and my hard-won personal peace will end forever. But if I choose to remain silent, I commit a mortal sin against my own conscience. I deliberately betray the only kind human being who extended a warm, grease-covered hand to rescue me when I was rotting at the absolute bottom of society. While I am violently torn between this profound sense of gratitude and the paralyzing fear of being exposed to the watching world, I slowly, deliberately turn my head to look across the dimly lit room. I stare at the silent man sitting at the very end of the table, my father, who seems to be an unspoken part of this eerie, suffocating silence. My father has always been a man of few words, a retired steel mill worker who reflects a traditional, quiet approach to life. He moves through the house almost invisibly, keeping his thoughts to himself and rarely sharing what is on his mind. Throughout his years, he has focused entirely on providing for the family, practicing a disciplined form of personal economy to ensure we always had what we needed. He is the kind of person who prefers to handle every household repair himself, spending hours working on the frozen pipes beneath the structure rather than calling for outside assistance. He has never been one for dining out or seeking personal comforts, choosing instead to wear the same durable Carhartt jacket for 15 years, completely content with its worn appearance. For a long time, I found myself assuming that his quiet nature meant he shared the same concerns as my mother and my brother. I quietly imagined that he looked at my life, seeing a 35-year-old son, still renting an apartment and driving an old vehicle, with a sense of quiet disappointment. During our family dinners, when my mother would wonder aloud about my career path, he never spoke up to offer a different perspective or to change the subject. He would simply sit there, looking out into the room with an expression that was impossible to read. I often wondered if his own history of hard work made him look at my apparent lack of progress with disapproval, or if he secretly felt I had not met the expectations he had for me. Even while sitting directly next to him, I felt a sense of distance, unsure of where I stood in his estimation. This quiet uncertainty weighed heavily on my mind, making each day feel like a slow, ongoing question that never received a clear answer. I kept trying to read the subtle changes in his expression, wondering if my secret lifestyle choices were creating an invisible barrier between us. This ongoing sense of doubt continued to build quietly within me, filling my thoughts as the winter season deepened. It felt as though I was waiting for a conversation that might never happen, constantly searching for a sign of true understanding. The unanswered questions remained unanswered until one stormy Friday night. The wind outside began to rattle the windows with unprecedented force, reflecting the inner pressure I had been carrying for so long, preparing for an unexpected encounter that would change everything in our home. As the winter weeks pass, the quiet curiosity within my family seems to express itself in small, unusual ways that I find increasingly difficult to interpret clearly. Just yesterday morning, while we were watching television together in the living room, my brother casually looked up from his digital tablet and suggested that I act as a guarantor for his new auto loan, even though he added with a gentle laugh, "I know you do not have the money, but let us just see what happens." Later that same afternoon, my mother spent several hours clearing out the old storage closets in the hallway. Without any prior discussion or explanation, she walked into my small room and handed me a neatly tied stack of faded documents concerning family investment funds and financial planning guides from years ago, saying absolutely nothing as she walked away. These unexpected interactions leave me wondering if they are dropping subtle hints about what they might suspect regarding my life. This quiet uncertainty follows me everywhere I go, extending far beyond the walls of our suburban home. At the office, when I stand by the water cooler or sit in my gray cubicle, I notice my colleagues looking at me with what feels like a new level of interest. When my friends join me for a casual lunch, I feel an uncomfortable sensation that everyone can see right through my cheap, worn winter coat, recognizing the gap between my outward appearance and my internal reality. With the local news constantly reporting on the challenging effects of inflation, I watch the people around me struggle to balance their budgets, which only heightens my own internal tension. I begin to feel almost like a hidden criminal, secretly guarding a massive treasure while everyone else navigates daily financial pressure, creating a deep sense of personal isolation that I cannot easily share. The ongoing conflict between wanting to quietly rescue my former employer from foreclosure and the persistent fear of family exposure leaves me feeling completely exhausted. Every option seems to carry a heavy consequence, and the weight of this decision drains my energy as I try to maintain my usual routine. I feel caught between my deep sense of duty toward Mateo and my strong desire to protect the quiet life I have built. Just when my spirits are at their lowest point, a sudden shift occurs in the quiet routine. It is exactly 2 o'clock in the morning, and a freezing winter snowstorm is raging outside my window, blanketing the streets in white. The clock on my kitchen wall silently marks 2:30 in the morning as the winter blizzard continues to rage furiously outside the heavy frost-covered window of my small, quiet one-bedroom apartment. Suddenly, breaking through the relentless noise of the storm, a deep, slow, and sure knock sounds against the heavy wooden front door. My own breath suddenly catches in my throat as I slowly walk across the cold floor, completely unsure of who could possibly be visiting at this late hour. I gently turn the lock and pull the door open, only to stand completely stunned as I find my father standing there on the concrete walkway. The harsh, freezing winter snow completely blankets the brim of his old baseball cap, and his face appears remarkably pale from the biting cold of the midnight air. An immediate wave of intense panic washes over me as I look at his quiet figure. My mind races through a dozen terrifying possibilities, and I instantly think that he must have somehow discovered the hidden truth about my investment account. I wonder if he has driven all this way through dangerous road conditions just to confront me directly, to demand an explanation for my secrecy, or to tell me that he finally knows the whole truth about his seemingly deceitful son. I stand huddled closely by the open door, my hands trembling slightly, and my heart pounding rapidly in my chest as I find myself bracing for an irreparable breakdown of the relationship we have maintained for so many years. The silence between us feels incredibly heavy, filled with all the questions I have avoided asking. Instead of speaking, my father simply steps inside the warm hallway, letting out a long, slow breath that turns into a faint mist. He silently walks into the room, gently shaking the loose white powder from his heavy coat. He carefully takes off his snow-covered boots, placing them neatly by the entrance mat, and then walks over to sit down quietly on the old, faded sofa in the center of my living space. He rests his old, weathered hands on his knees, looking remarkably calm despite the freezing storm he just escaped. I try to regain my composure, moving quietly toward the small counter to put some water on the stove. My fingers shake as I tremblingly make him a hot cup of coffee, carefully pouring the dark liquid into a ceramic mug while keeping my eyes fixed on the task. I stand there in the quiet kitchen, fully awaiting a difficult judgment or a direct, uncomfortable question regarding the large amount of money I have kept hidden from everyone. But what happens next in that quiet room is outside of my wildest fantasies, shifting the entire nature of our relationship in a way I could never have anticipated. My father wraps his large, calloused hands around the warm ceramic mug, the rough skin bearing the permanent stains and scars of a lifelong mechanic. He does not cast a single glance toward the corner desk, where my laptop screen remains lit, displaying an open, fluctuating stock market chart. Throughout our quiet encounter, he completely avoids mentioning words like money, assets, or hidden wealth. Instead, he simply turns his head toward the dark window, watching the fierce snowstorm swirl under the streetlights as he begins to speak in a quiet, reflective tone. He quietly recounts the bitter winter of 1996, a challenging time when the local steel mill suddenly shut its doors, leaving our entire community uncertain about the future. To keep us afloat, he had to take on extra, exhausting night shifts inside a freezing cold warehouse, working long hours in sub-zero temperatures just to earn enough extra income to surprise me with the specific baseball kit I had dreamed about all year. Looking back toward me, he speaks in a deep, remarkably even voice, saying, "I have never been particularly good at sweet talk, son. All my life, I have only truly known one single objective, and that was keeping this family from freezing to death. Son, I know you have gone through a very difficult, lonely time during your years living away in Chicago, but seeing you now, living completely independently, remaining remarkably thrifty, and not getting caught up in the extravagant luxuries of the outside world, I know you have truly grown into a real man. I am deeply proud of that." He slowly finishes the remaining coffee in his mug, carefully sets it down on the small table, and stands up from the worn sofa. Before moving toward the exit, he steps forward and pats me firmly on the shoulder, a simple gesture carrying an absolute, profound understanding between two men. He clearly does not need to reveal or discuss the specific numbers hidden within my private bank accounts. He only needs to know that his son possesses the true ability to survive and maintain his steadfastness against the pressures of life. He calmly opens the front door and walks straight out into the raging winter snowstorm, leaving me standing completely speechless in the center of the quiet room. The heavy wooden door closes softly behind his retreating figure, sealing out the freezing wind. In an instant, the intense paranoia, heavy fear, and deep doubts that had weighed so painfully on my mind for so many months suddenly vanish entirely like fading smoke, quickly giving way to an overwhelming sense of absolute emotional relief and a profound mental clarity within my quiet heart. Standing alone in the quiet warmth of my room, I experience a profound sense of psychological liberation wash over me, clearing away months of persistent doubt. I suddenly realize that I no longer need to carry the exhausting fear of my family's ongoing curiosity or judgment. My father's calm silence tonight acts as my greatest guarantee and most reliable protection. He deeply understands and genuinely respects my quiet path to wealth, because he spent his own life navigating the shadows in that exact manner, to care for us. With an entirely clear mind, the complicated choice that had drained my energy resolves itself easily. I firmly decide to rescue my former benefactor, Mateo, from his current financial crisis without compromising my privacy. Tomorrow morning, I will quietly hire an established legal firm to arrange an anonymous corporate donation to completely pay off his old auto repair shop's entire bank debt, fully keeping my silent vow of personal gratitude. My father did not come to count my money. He came to remind me who I was before the money arrived. He did not break my mask. He simply let me know that, under his silence, I was always understood. The world can keep guessing, and my family can keep watching. I will set up the anonymous trust to save the man who saved me, and I will keep driving my dented Corolla. The final entry is this: the greatest silent wealth is not how much money you can hide from the world, but realizing there is a man who has spent his life in the shadows teaching you how to walk steadily without anyone's applause. I turned off the lights, looked out the window at the blizzard that had subsided, and continued walking on the path I had chosen. Silently, peacefully.